Thank you, Deputy. We go on to Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, please.
Cian Corla and Minister, I have two sets of questions, so I'd be grateful if halfway through my time you let me back in for the second round. I won't be interrupting you in terms of responding. On the 7th of December, the Minister categorically denied that anyone was being turned away from emergency accommodation, speaking on Morning Ireland. 4 days later, RTE Investigates filmed this cruel and inhumane practice taking place when Carlo Mann, Joe Nolan, was refused access to emergency accommodation, and he had to sleep rough in a car park that night, as he had been doing for quite some time. This happened on a night when 75 emergency beds were lying empty. Since the RTE Investigates programme aired last week, this practice is continuing on an ongoing basis. In addition, people who have been fleeing domestic violence have also been refused access to shelter based on these rules. And keeping it under review, Minister, simply is not good enough. It is not good enough for people who are sleeping rough last night tonight. I'm asking you, Minister, do you acknowledge that despite what you've said, the practice of turning people away from emergency accommodation is continuing? Will you issue explicit instruction, not talking about discretion, but explicit instruction to local authorities and the Dublin Homeless Regional Executive to stop turning people away? And will you now act to end this cruel and inhumane practice?
Minister.
I respect Deputy O'Callaghan and the fact that all of us here, and he indeed, want to play our part in helping those who are homeless and getting them into emergency accommodation when they need it. I think he does a disservice to those who are working in the sector here in Dublin with some of the charges and in the city that you've actually made. Let's be straight about this. I've given very clear direction. On the 7th, again on the 9th in writing, you know that. It wasn't about discretion, it was very clear. I've met the DRHE since then, since the RTE Investigates programme, which I participated in. And those two gentlemen who were refused emergency accommodation, that should not have happened, and I said that very clearly. There are other elements in each of those instances which I can't go into here either, and that did occur that evening as well. But we've been very clear about that. There is capacity in emergency beds in all our major cities, and we've done that because we're funding it. 300 extra beds in this city. The practice does. I'm in regular contact, and I mean on a daily basis, with outreach teams as well. Maybe, Deputy, it might be worthwhile if you sought a briefing yourself from the DRHE, and I can arrange that, and I think you would find it useful, because there are complexities around our rough sleepers and around getting people into emergency accommodation from time to time. People cannot be forced, nor they should be, into emergency accommodation. But what I can tell you, it's been recognised already from those in outreach teams, that the changes that we made around local connection, and I'm not ambiguous about it, I'm very clear, local connection is not a barrier to people accessing emergency accommodation, and that has changed, and if any instances are brought to my attention since then, we will deal with them. It's a process change.
Thank you, Minister.
But, so I know you've other...
O'Callaghan.
Well, thanks, and let's be very clear, we're not talking about anyone being forced into emergency accommodation. We're talking about people who are asking for access to emergency accommodation and are continuing to be refused. They are continuing to be refused, and I think it's quite shocking now that, at this point, after everything that's been documented on this, that the Minister for Housing isn't aware of this. So,
yeah, because it's a very serious issue. Yeah. I'm engaging every single day and literally. So if there are any instances, you need to bring them to my attention, because you haven't, and I would ask that you do. Okay, and I wonder, have you, Deputy, picked up the phone to the outreach teams and actually brought those instances to people's attention? I hope that you have, and if you haven't, I would urge you to do so we can deal with it. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people here. Where process falls down, we need to fix it. There is not there's not a push for this not to happen. Local connection is no barrier to people accessing emergency accommodation, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not occurring anymore. But if it is, do please let me know and give me instances, and I'll deal with it.
It is occurring. We've been bringing this to your attention now for several months, and I will continue to bring this to your attention. But it is occurring on an ongoing basis.
Since the 9th of December, and since the correspondence went out, I haven't received any specific cases from you of instances where this has occurred. I've had one case last weekend that was addressed immediately. That was it. Nothing since, and nothing from yourself. So let's be honest about
Minister.
it. And if there is, I'm happy to engage with you about it and deal with specific matters, because people are not being turned away from emergency accommodation. And if, in a rare instance that happens, please bring it to my attention and we'll deal with it. But don't wait to come into the Dáil to make a charge if you're not addressing it yourself.
People are being turned away from emergency accommodation. And I actually have to say, I think the Minister for Housing, you have a responsibility in this area, and not to put it all on the opposition. We have been making you aware of this on an ongoing basis. My second question, Minister, is in the limited time, is why is the National Quality Standards Framework not being applied to all emergency providers? People are being turned away from emergency accommodation. And I actually have to say, I think the Minister for Housing, you have a responsibility in this area, and not to put it all on the opposition. We have been making you aware of this on an ongoing basis. My second question, Minister, and I will engage with you more on this, but you have a responsibility on this, and you cannot charge that we have not been engaging with you on this or raising this with you. It's on the Dáil record. I've been doing it on an ongoing basis. My second question, Minister, is in the limited time, is why is the National Quality Standards Framework not being applied to all emergency providers of homeless accommodation, including private providers?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Your second question, it is, and we've provided for additional inspectors and funding for those inspections to take place. I think you know that, and more inspections need to happen. But the national standards do apply to private hostels as well. I've raised that issue. What I said to you earlier, to clarify it, I'm not laying any responsibility on you. The responsibility, I'm saying, is mine as Minister for Housing. But where you're responsible as a housing spokesperson for a part of the opposition, if you know of a specific instance where an individual recently, since I brought those changes in, has been refused emergency accommodation, pick up the phone and ring me. You haven't done that, and I would urge you to do so.
Thank you,
we will deal with it, because it's serious.
Time is up. We need to move on, Minister. Now our next contributors are